This is why you should never go diving alone. In April 2000, diving instructor Yuri Lipsky was exploring the Blue Hole, which is a popular diving spot off the coast of Egypt. Yuri did not have the equipment to be diving below 130 feet, which is generally considered dangerous for recreational divers. When diving that deep, narcosis and oxygen toxicity become dangerous health factors. Narcosis can produce insane hallucinations and can drive someone mad. Because of this, special training is required, and divers must use a special helium mixture in their tanks to survive. Yuri was using a regular oxygen tank instead of helium, and was also carrying heavy camera equipment, which caused him to sink 300 feet to the ocean floor where he went mad. Yuri died, and when the body was retrieved, they found a helmet cam that recorded everything that happened before he died. This is what they found. This story will break your heart. Once there was a boy named Bruno who was in love with a girl named Natasha. At school, he always tried to sit beside her and defended her when others made fun of her. One day, Bruno looked at Natasha in the hallway. She said, "What are you looking at, you ugly turd? Get away from me." Heartbroken, Bruno ran out of school and didn't come back. Weeks later, he turned up at school. Natasha saw him and said, "Look everyone, the turd is back," and everyone laughed at him. Bruno covered his face in embarrassment. Suddenly, a man with a gun entered the cafeteria and demanded everyone to empty their pockets. Shaking, Natasha emptied hers, but nothing came out. The man pointed the gun at her, but before he could pull the trigger, Bruno tackled him to the ground. Suddenly, a shot rang out and the man fled. Natasha ran to Bruno, who was laying on the ground. "Why would you do that?" she cried. He replied, "Why do you care? I thought I was just a turd," and died. I promise you will cry by the end of this. A girl was standing behind the counter at a gas station that she worked at. She looked up and saw her boyfriend walk in. As he was looking at snacks, a man walked in and pointed a gun at her while she was admiring her engagement ring that her boyfriend gave her a month earlier. The man demanded her to give the ring to him, but she refused. The boyfriend looked up just in time to see her get shot in the face. The man fled immediately. He called 911, and when the ambulance arrived, he was kneeling over her, sobbing uncontrollably. But the girlfriend remarkably had a pulse. The boyfriend stayed at the hospital all night, and when she finally awoke, he cried, "Why wouldn't you just give him the ring?" She said, "Because I knew that ring was part of your love for me, and if I gave it up, I would lose that love." Then she died. 5 scary facts about North Korea. Number 1, they use human feces as fertilizer, and citizens are forced to provide it. Number 2, owning a Bible is punishable by death. Number 3, blue jeans are illegal. Number 4, there are only 15 hairstyles to choose from. This is why you should never go to Disneyland. In 1981, a man was murdered in the Tomorrowland lineup. A man accused an 18-year-old of pinching his girlfriend, then stabbed him to death. In 2003, at Big Thunder Mountain, the roller coaster derailed and injured 10 people, and even crushed one passenger to death. This story will keep you up at night. Once there was a girl named Donna who lived with her father. The father went to work, same as usual, but that night he didn't come home. By midnight, the father still wasn't home, but Donna decided to go to bed anyway. She had a dream that night of a man standing in the roadway. She could tell it was her father, and he was mouthing the words, "Don't open the door." That moment, the doorbell rang. She rushed to the door and looked through the peephole. Her father's eyes were staring back at her. "Dad?" she said, but there was no answer. Terrified, she went back to bed, thinking it was all a dream. The next morning, she woke up and checked the front door, and shrieked in horror. Her dad's severed head was hanging from a nail above the door with a note that read, "Clever girl." This story will break your heart. Once there was a woman who lived in a small town in Spain with her husband. They had a young daughter who was always causing mischief at school. The parents were at their wits' end because they couldn't handle her anymore. One day, the mom dropped her off at school, same as always. But a few hours later, her daughter was back in the house, standing in the stairwell, just staring there blankly at the wall. "What are you doing here?" the mother screamed. She noticed there was blood on her forehead. "I'm so sorry," the girl cried, and ran to her room, sobbing. Suddenly, the phone rang and the mother picked it up. "This is the school principal," the man said on the other line. "What did she do this time?" the mother scowled. "You don't understand," he said. "Your daughter fell off the school roof and hit her head and died instantly. I'm so sorry." The mom immediately dropped the phone and ran to her daughter's bedroom, but it was empty. This story will shatter you. Once there was an 18-year-old boy named Mike who had had enough of life. He had suffered from anxiety and depression for years, so he made a plan to end it all on a camping trip with his girlfriend and his little brother. They all drove to the mountains that weekend. They pitched a tent and made a fire. As it was getting dark, Mike decided it was time to go through with it. He told the two he was tired and was going to bed in the tent. He sat down and began to weep. "I guess this is it," he said. He slit both his wrists and his neck for good measure and slowly drifted off into unconsciousness. All of a sudden, he woke up. There were no cuts on his hands or neck. He stepped out of the tent and screamed in terror. His girlfriend and his brother were lying in a pool of blood with a message written in the dirt saying, "When you hurt yourself, you hurt the ones you love." These pictures were taken moments before tragedy struck. This was the last photo ever taken of Kobe Bryant. This 13-year-old snapped this photo the day of the helicopter crash. This is the last photo ever taken of Paul Walker. He's climbing into the car that would eventually crash and kill him that day. The crazy part is he wasn't even driving. A professional race car driver was. This is the last picture taken of Robin Williams, only a week before he committed suicide. This story will break your heart. There was a girl named Becca and a boy named Joe. Becca was trapped in a burning house. None of the firefighters could get in because the fire was too big. Joe dressed up as one of the firemen and went into the house. When he got up the stairs, the steps fell behind him. When he got to the room she was in, he sealed the door. He held her tight and told her he loved her. She asked what was wrong and he told her he was going to die. She began to cry uncontrollably. He picked her up and jumped through the window of the 4-story house. He landed on his back and she landed on top of him. He broke her fall and was killed. He died to save her life. The ending will leave you shattered. Timmy's dad always hated him. His life was a living hell. He felt he could never do anything right and became his father's punching bag. One day he couldn't take it anymore and ran away from home. But the police found him and brought him back, where his father was waiting for him. He screamed, "You think you could escape?" That night, the dad went too far. He beat Timmy so bad he couldn't move. He laid on his bedroom floor, helpless, and no one ever came to check on him. That night, he felt his life drifting away as he slipped into unconsciousness. Suddenly, he saw a bright light and heard a voice, "It's a healthy baby boy." He opened his eyes and a man and woman were staring at him. The man leaned in and gently whispered in his ear, "Did you think you could escape?" If you're afraid of clowns, I wouldn't watch this. A few years ago, a teenage girl went to babysit her neighbors because the parents were gone for the night. The parents requested she stay in their bedroom to be close to the kids who were having nightmares recently. After she tucked the kids in later that night, she went to watch TV in the parents' bedroom. When she sat down, she noticed an eerie clown statue in the corner of the room. She tried to ignore it, but couldn't get over the feeling that the clown was watching her. Time passed and the babysitter couldn't handle it anymore. She went downstairs and phoned the parents. She said, "Everything's fine, but this clown statue is freaking me out." The father said, "What clown statue?" The phone went silent for a minute. Then he said, "Get the kids out of the house right now." She grabbed the kids and they fled to the street. The clown turned out to be a killer who was living in the attic for months. The kids have been complaining about a clown watching them, but the parents never believed. This is why you should never go camping without a weapon. 19-year-old Olga Ostoliviova was camping with her stepdad near a river in Russia when a bear attacked them. Moments later, the 500-pound brown bear broke the stepdad's neck and smashed his skull. Olga attempted to run but only got about 200 feet before the bear grabbed her leg and forced her to the ground. Olga was able to make 3 calls to her mother while the bear and her 3 cubs were eating her. In the first call, Olga screamed, "Mom, the bear is eating me. It's agony. Please help." At first, she thought Olga was joking, but then she heard the horror in Olga's voice and the sounds of bears chewing. The mother called the police and begged them to rush to the river. Her call with her daughter was cut off 3 times, as she could only helplessly listen to her cries for mercy. In her last call to her mother, she cried, "It doesn't hurt anymore. I love you so much." And that's the last her mother heard of her. This is the story of the 2 spoons. A kid named James loved to watch disturbing videos. And one night he came across a video he'd never seen before. It was a video of a man using 2 spoons to pop out his eyeballs. James watched the whole video, even though it was unbearable to watch. When the video was over, his mom called him for dinner. He raced downstairs and sat at the table. His dad was reading the newspaper and his mom was setting up dinner. The dad said, "That's odd. Apparently there's a viral video going around that's dangerous to watch. Apparently it causes anybody to watch it to pop out their eyeballs." His father then looked up and was paralyzed in fear. His mom looked over and shrieked in pure horror, but it was already too late. James could feel the spoons in his hands, but couldn't see a thing. This is a story of the black birthmark. There was a 4-year-old boy who lived in a small village. He was born with a black birthmark on his forehead. As soon as he was old enough to talk, he told his family that he had lived before. He pointed to the birthmark on his forehead and told them a man murdered him with an axe. His parents then took him to the house where he claimed he lived before. He said he remembered his name, and it was the same name as the person who went missing from the village 4 years earlier. The boy remembered what the man who killed him looked like and also his name. When he saw the man across the street, he walked right up up to him and said, "I used to be your neighbor. We had a fight and then you killed me with an axe." The man turned white like a ghost. The boy said he knew where he buried his body. They went to a field where they found a pile of rocks. Under the rocks was a skeleton with a wound in the exact same place as the birthmark. I promise you will cry by the end of this. There was a blind girl who hated herself just because she was blind. She hated everyone, except her loving boyfriend. He was always there for her. She said if she could only see the world, she would marry her boyfriend. One day, someone donated a pair of eyes to her so she could see the world for the first time, including her boyfriend. Her boyfriend asked her, "Now that you can see the world, will you marry me?" The girl was shocked to find out her boyfriend was blind too and refused to marry him. The boyfriend walked away in tears and later wrote a letter to her saying, "Take care of my eyes, I love you." The ending will keep you up at night. A young girl was left home alone with only her dog to protect her. On the news that night, they announced there was a serial killer on the loose in the area. The girl decides to lock all the doors and windows, but the basement one won't lock for some reason. She decides to go to sleep anyway, and her dog takes his regular place under the bed. In the deep of night, she awakens to a dripping sound coming from her bathroom. Half awake, the girl feels the comforting lick of her dog and goes back to sleep. She wakes up again to the dripping sound, but feels the reassuring lick of her dog and goes back to sleep. After waking up a third time, she decides to check the bathroom to see what the sound is. The dripping getting louder as she gets nearer. She opens the door and finds her dog hanging there in the bathroom. Something in the mirror catches her eye. Painted on the mirror read the words, "Humans can lick too."